Hey guys, Mr. Jalapeno here with another episode of Jalapeno Drywall. I'm going to show you step by step on how I repaired it, so stay tuned. So the first thing I did was I made a pit stop at Home Depot, that way I could restock on some of the materials that I usually use on a day-to-day. I like to grab some of these 1/4-inch rollers, that's for smooth surfaces, and then I grab some of these 1/2-inch rollers, those are for more like textured walls. Those metal trade liners also come in handy whenever you're painting. And for the caulk, I personally like these Alex Fast Dry because they're paintable in 20 minutes, so it speeds up the process a little bit more. And also you can't forget about the blue tape and plastic, that's very important. For the primer, there's a lot of options, but this is the one I like. And for the drywall mud, a lot of people like to use the joint compound, but I like to use this Easy Sand 5, that way I could finish the repair in one day. If I was to use joint compound, it would take a couple days to complete this repair, which doesn't make business sense for me. I also grabbed a couple texture bags from that Easy Pro texture system. That stuff works great for this type of repair. But anyways, first thing I did was I laid down some plastic, that way I don't make a mess. I then grabbed my utility blade and I cleaned up the area around the patch, as you can see right here. This is going to help the drywall piece lay nice and flat. The HVAC guy who referred me to this client did an excellent job cutting the drywall. He actually cut it stud to stud, so that helps. I don't have to put any backing or anything. All I had to do was just put up that drywall piece up against the studs and then put a couple screws. Just remember not to go too deep in with your screws. You know, you don't want to rip that drywall paper because then it's not going to be holding much. There was a little bit of damage on the drywall corners, but once I pre-fill, it should take care of that. And I also like to do the little valleys or V-groove around the seams. This is going to help get mud into the seams, that way there's no air bubbles, and it's going to help strengthen it a little bit more. And like I mentioned earlier, for the mud, I'm going to be using this Easy Sand 5. A lot of people call it hot mud. I put a little bit in my mud pan and then I added a little bit of water. I'm looking for a peanut butter consistency. And once I was done mixing, I applied it to the seams, and this is what's called pre-fill. You have to make sure that you really push the mud into the seams, that way you avoid any air bubbles. I'm practically removing all the mud except for what's in the seams. And after that, I'm going to apply this mesh tape around the seams, that way it's going to help strengthen this repair a little bit more. It's kind of like how rebar strengthens concrete, but in this case it's going to strengthen this patch. You can also use paper tape or fiberfuse, it's totally up to you. Next, I'm going to be applying the first coat of mud, but instead of using Easy Sand 5, I'm going to be using Easy Sand 20. The reason is because that Easy Sand 20 is going to give me a little bit more work time before it starts getting too hard. When mixing the first coat, instead of doing it like peanut butter, I recommend like a sour cream consistency, if that makes any sense. If you do it this way, it just helps that mud spread a little bit better, like I'm doing here. The main goal on the first coat is just to spread out the mud evenly. As you saw there, I used my 12-inch to just spread everything out, and then I'm just using my 8-inch knife to feather out the edge, that way there's not going to be a thick edge and it's going to blend in better with the wall. And to smooth out the hot mud even more, I'm going to be using this level 5 24-inch blade. I have different sizes of these level 5 blades, but this is the one I use the most. And so if you're getting any value from these videos, don't forget to follow and subscribe for more content like this. But anyways, now the first coat is pretty much done. I'm going to set up a fan, that way it speeds up the process and it dries a little bit quicker. After about an hour, I'm going to use my 6-inch drywall knife to wet sand the patch. That's going to help not create any drywall dust, that way it doesn't get all dusty everywhere. Then for the second coat, I mixed another batch of hot mud, that way I could apply it over the first coat. This is going to help fill in any uneven areas around the patch. After I was done with the second coat, I grabbed a wet rag and wiped off the edge around the patch. Remember, I'm trying to blend it in as much as I can to the existing wall. If you have smooth walls, let it dry for a few hours and then you could go ahead and prime and paint. But it just wouldn't be a Mr. Jalapeno video without any knockdown texture. So after a few hours, I went ahead and primed it. That way I could see any imperfections before I start texturing. Sometimes I can't really see any imperfections just because it's drying differently. But once I apply the primer, I could see if there's anything that needs more attention. After that, it is now time to texture. I'm going to be using the Easy Pro texture system. I like to keep my compressor at about 80 psi. This stuff is great for applying knockdown and orange peel texture. I like to shoot it in a circular motion, that way everything spreads out really good. And once I had shot the texture, I waited about 5 minutes before I started knocking it down. And if you want to get some of the tools and materials that I used here in this video, you could go to Home Depot. You can also get them in my Amazon storefront if you want to help out the channel at no extra cost to you. And so look, after 5 minutes, I'm using the magic trowel to knock it down. And that's kind of the reason why this texture is called knockdown, because you have to knock it down. If you don't knock it down, it just kind of looks like heavy orange peel, which in my opinion doesn't look the greatest. Unfortunately, the texture does take a little bit longer before you can start painting, but once it's dry, all you have to do is just wipe off the overspray and it should be good. The client is going to end up painting the whole laundry room, so he said not to worry about painting it. And yeah, what do you think of this repair? Should I have done something different? Let me know in the comments. Jalapeno Solutions. Boom!